At 14:15 p.m. on October 28, 1944, Lieutenant Richard Dick Haynes returned to his airfield in Italy. His reconnaissance mission was a failure. Worse, his wingman, Lieutenant Smith, was dead. Haynes was not a conventional pilot. Before the war, he was a salesman for high-end optical equipment, cameras, telephoto lenses, and telescopes. He understood the complex physics of glass, refraction, and clarity. Now, he was flying a P-38 Lightning, tasked with photographing and identifying German targets far behind enemy lines. The problem wasn't the German flak. The problem was clarity. Haynes's mission had been to verify the location of a new German heavy artillery battery near the Arno River. The battery was positioned exactly at the limit of the P-38's operational range. To identify the targets, to resolve the image of the gun muzzles and verify the camouflage, Haynes had to close the distance. The best military reconnaissance scopes of the era had a clear zone of about 3 miles. Beyond that, the image dissolved into a blurry mass of color and shape. The mathematics were absolute. German 88mm anti-aircraft guns had an effective range of 4 miles. To complete his mission, Haynes had to cross the invisible line and enter the 4-mile kill zone. He had pushed his P-38 low. He had exposed himself to the terrifying, black flak clouds. He flew through a storm of heavy artillery bursts to get the necessary detail. He got the photo. But his wingman, Smith, didn't make it back. Smith was killed by a direct hit from an 88mm shell. The reconnaissance mission was a statistical trade, one piece of verified intelligence for one pilot's life. Haynes sat in the debriefing room, staring at the blurred photo he had obtained at such a high cost. The image was grainy, distorted, and slightly unfocused. The identification was inconclusive. The mission was a total, unnecessary failure. The General Staff demanded higher resolution. The engineers demanded stronger armor. Haynes knew both were wrong. The flaw was not in the armor, it was in the optics. The standard-issue military scopes were rugged. They were built to survive the high G-forces of combat maneuvers and rough landings. They were built to be strong, but they were not built to be clear. The glass was chemically treated for durability and mass production, sacrificing the precise, minute detail required for long-distance resolution. Haynes knew he had the solution in his locker. Before shipping out, he had carefully packed the disassembled lens from his personal, high-end civilian Leica telephoto camera. The camera was designed for one purpose: to capture perfect detail from extreme distances. The glass was custom-ground, layered with specific compounds designed to eliminate chromatic aberration and maximize light transmission. It was fragile, expensive, and completely non-regulation. He pulled the scope off his P-38. He placed it next to the delicate lens components from his Leica. The contrast was immediate. The military optic was a tough, blunt instrument. The civilian optic was a surgical scalpel. The solution was a clear act of treason against doctrine: modify the military issue scope using civilian, mail-order parts. He needed to remove the final, flawed military lens element and replace it with the superior Leica glass. This required cutting, filing, and meticulous reassembly in a dust-free environment, a technical impossibility on a forward airbase. Haynes found the chief ordnance officer, Major Peterson. Peterson was a rigid man who trusted only the ordnance manual. Haynes presented his case. "Major, the standard M6 scope is killing our pilots. If I can adapt this civilian glass, I can verify targets from 5 miles away. We can sit outside the flak range." Peterson looked at the delicate, complex civilian lens components. "Lieutenant, those are civilian components. They are not rated for the G-force. They will shatter on your first sharp turn, blinding you. Furthermore, modification of standard-issue optics is strictly forbidden. It compromises the calibration tables. The current calibration table is a death sentence, Major," Haynes countered. "It forces us to fly into the 88mm zone. If I can see the targets, I can save the pilots. If the lens shatters, I'll land the plane. But right now, we are failing the mission with a clear conscience." Peterson refused. We will wait for the redesigned M7. You will use the equipment issued to you. Haynes walked out. He did not argue. He simply carried his scope and the Leica lens components to a small, isolated maintenance shack. He was ready to commit an illegal modification that would either win the intelligence war or result in his court-martial for the destruction of government property. He found a skilled field mechanic, a master jeweler named Sergeant Miller, who had been reduced to polishing gun brass. Miller understood precision. Miller looked at the task: take the delicate civilian glass, file down its casing, mount it perfectly into the military scope housing, and seal it. If the alignment is off by 1/100th of an inch, the image will be worse than useless, Miller warned. I am aware, Sergeant, Haynes replied. I need you to give me the visual range the military denies us. Miller nodded slowly. He looked at the fragile glass and the rough steel. The ultimate test of civilian craftsmanship against military dogma was about to begin. The stakes were clear. The next reconnaissance mission would either prove the absolute superiority of mail-order glass or result in the loss of one more pilot. Sergeant Miller, the master jeweler reduced to polishing gun brass, looked at the delicate task. The objective was to seat the fragile civilian Leica lens element into the rugged military scope housing with zero misalignment. The tolerance for error was 1/100th of an inch. If the angle was off, the resolution would be ruined. If he filed too deep, the fragile glass would shatter. Miller requisitioned the smallest tools available: a jeweler's loupe, ultrafine files, and specialized dental calipers. He converted the isolated maintenance shack into a makeshift clean room, using wet blankets to settle the dust. The modification was mechanical surgery. Miller first had to carefully disassemble the military scope, preserving the calibration tables while removing the flawed final lens element. He then spent 6 agonizing hours filing the hard aluminum casing of the Leica lens component, working with the care usually reserved for a diamond setting. The lens was seated with a final, slow, deliberate pressure. The illegal modification was complete. The scope was reassembled. From the outside, only the most dedicated ordnance expert would notice the difference in the reflection of the glass. Lieutenant Haynes took the modified scope to his P-38. The first test was not against the enemy, it was against physics. He took the plane to altitude. He subjected the fighter to sharp, high G turns, maneuvers that would tear conventional components apart. He pushed the plane to maximum speed. The lens held. The mounting was perfect. The jeweler had beaten the military engineer. The statistical reality of the failure was overcome. Haynes was ready for the mission. He was tasked with identifying targets in the crucial, heavily defended Valley. The primary target was a new rail repair depot the Germans had disguised under heavy foliage. Haynes approached the area, flying at high altitude. He armed his camera and swung the modified scope into position. He looked down. He expected the familiar blur, the merging of green and brown that defined the 3-mile limit of the military optics. But the image was crystal clear. The difference was absolute. Where the old scope showed a fuzzy, indistinct mass, the new scope, reinforced by the civilian Leica glass, resolved the image with stunning clarity. Haynes could distinguish individual rail cars, the camouflage netting, and the specific curvature of the repair shed roof, all from a distance of 5 miles. He was sitting 1 mile outside the maximum effective range of the German 88mm flak guns. He was in the clear zone. Haynes flew a precise, measured path, clicking his camera shutters. He confirmed the target. He obtained perfect, verifiable photographic proof. The mission was a success. And the intelligence was obtained with 0 threat and 0 casualties. The mathematical ratio of risk had been inverted: precision, civilian, danger, military. Haynes landed the P-38 back at the airfield. He knew he had succeeded. He had the photos, and he had his wingman's life. But trouble was waiting. Major Peterson, the ordnance officer who had refused the modification, was standing at the edge of the runway, his face tight with anger. He had tracked the unauthorized work order for the specialized tools. Peterson marched directly to the P-38. "Lieutenant Haynes! I ordered you to use regulation equipment. Where is your M6 scope?" Haynes calmly retrieved the modified scope and handed it to Peterson. Peterson immediately saw the polished alteration on the casing. He saw the faint, precise line where the new glass element had been fitted. "This is an unauthorized modification," Peterson stated, his voice tight. "You have compromised government property and risked your life based on civilian toys. This is a clear breach of protocol." "Major," Haynes replied, his voice level, "I have the photo evidence. The target is confirmed. I identified it from 5 miles. If I had used the M6, I would be dead, and the target would remain unverified. The mission succeeded with 0 cost." Peterson was faced with an ethical paradox. The mission was a success, but the method was illegal. The manual dictated charges, but reality dictated a commendation. He looked at the scope, the physical proof of the violation. He looked at the perfect, high-resolution photographs, which proved the success. "The success is irrelevant, Lieutenant," Peterson stated coldly. "You have violated the integrity of the supply chain. Ordnance cannot issue non-regulation components. You will be reported for the modification of the M6. Haynes understood. The bureaucracy was more concerned with the paperwork than with the lives saved. But the evidence, the perfect photograph, was already in the hands of the intelligence officers. The successful mission, achieved with 0 casualties, was a statistical anomaly that could not be ignored. The innovation, born of desperation and civilian optics, was about to spread. But not through official channels. The Navy would have to confront the uncomfortable truth: their expensive, rugged military glass was inferior to a mail-order civilian lens. Major Peterson's threat of a court-martial was neutralized by the simple statistical reality of Lieutenant Haynes's mission success: verifiable intelligence obtained with 0 casualties. The high-resolution photographs Haynes provided were immediately circulated to General Staff. The clarity, the ability to resolve detail from 5 miles, was unprecedented. Ordnance manuals stated this was impossible for the M6 scope. Reality stated the manual was now functionally obsolete. The innovation spread horizontally, pilot to pilot, faster than any official memo could travel. Other reconnaissance pilots, weary of sacrificing wingmen for blurry photos, began demanding the Haynes modification. Sergeant Miller, the master jeweler, became the most important man on the base. His isolated maintenance shack became the unofficial, illegal ordnance modification center. His services were in demand not by generals, but by pilots willing to risk their careers for the sake of survival. Miller worked meticulously, integrating fragile civilian glass into rigid military frames. The demand quickly outstripped the supply of spare civilian lenses. The innovation had inadvertently exposed a critical flaw in the military's supply chain: the best equipment was civilian, and it was not available. The solution required a new kind of logistical hack: the civilian postal system. Pilots began writing home to their mothers, wives, and friends, asking for specific lens elements, Leica, Kodak, and Zeiss glass, to be shipped overseas. The most sensitive military hardware upgrade was now dependent on parcels arriving safely via the Global Postal Service, mixed in with letters and home-baked cookies. Meanwhile, Major Peterson and the Ordnance Corps fought back with the only weapons they had: memos and bureaucracy. Peterson wrote a scathing report on the unauthorized use of non-regulation fragile optics, citing the high risk of pilot blindness and compromised flight safety. He argued that allowing the modification would lead to an unmanageable logistical nightmare and damage the sanctity of the military supply system. Lieutenant Haynes was immediately transferred to a remote, non-flying logistical post, a classic military maneuver designed to sideline the innovator and prevent the idea from spreading further. He was effectively punished for his success. But the administrative war was already lost. The intelligence being gathered by the illegally modified scopes was saving entire operations. The German High Command was the first to confirm the efficiency of the hack. Their flak commanders in the P Valley began filing bewildered reports. They noted that the Allied reconnaissance planes were consistently flying 2 miles beyond the maximum effective range of their 88mm guns. The German defense grid had been neutralized by a simple difference in lens quality. Their statistical safe zone was gone. The German flak commanders tried to adapt. They wasted ammunition firing long bursts outside the effective range, hoping to intimidate the recon pilots. The result was a massive, documented waste of German resources and 0 hits. The official military establishment was trapped in an ethical paradox. Ordnance demanded the modification cease immediately, citing Regulation 4A. Intelligence demanded the modification continue immediately, citing the immediate need for clear, deep penetration photos. Operations demanded the modification continue immediately, citing the pilot casualty rate for recon missions, which had plummeted to 0.4%. The evidence of the civilian lens was irrefutable. Haynes had proven that the expensive, rugged military issue was functionally inferior. The Navy was forced to surrender to the reality of the field. A temporary solution was found. The Ordnance Corps would formally salvage the civilian lenses arriving via the postal system. Sergeant Miller was promoted to chief optician and given a team of technicians, with the explicit order to continue integrating the civilian glass. The ultimate irony was that the military bureaucracy was forced to acknowledge the superiority of the civilian supply chain and the craftsmanship of a jeweler. However, the official credit was carefully managed. Haynes's role was minimized in the reports. The new, superior scopes were formalized under the anonymous title M6 Mod. C. The bureaucracy stole the invention and sanitized the risk. The solution was now official, but the inventor was silenced. Haynes, relegated to desk work, watched the mission reports come in. He saw the continuous stream of perfect, high-resolution photos obtained from outside the kill zone. He saw the pilot casualty rates remain near 0. He had won the war of optics, but lost the battle for his career. He knew that across the Italian theater, pilots were now surviving unnecessary missions, all because a jeweler had filed down the casing of a mail-order civilian lens. Act 3. The War of the Memos and the Superiority of Civilian Glass. The successful intelligence being gathered by the M6 Mod. C forced the bureaucracy into an uncomfortable state of semi-official compliance. The innovation was too valuable to stop, but too illegal to fully sanction. Sergeant Miller's maintenance shack became the most critical, unauthorized optical laboratory in the European theater. He was managing a technical black market. The flow of civilian lenses, Leica, Kodak, Zeiss, arriving in small, innocuous parcels via the Postal Service determined the strategic success of the Allied recon effort. Miller, the jeweler, was now effectively controlling a critical part of the U.S. Army's intelligence gathering capacity. The tactical advantage was immediately felt by the enemy. German AA, anti-aircraft, commanders filed increasingly frantic reports. They noted that the Allied reconnaissance pilots were consistently flying 2 miles outside the effective 4-mile range of their best 88mm flak guns. Their defense grid, once a statistically reliable mechanism for inflicting casualties, was now rendered functionally obsolete. The AA gunners were instructed to fire longer, desperate bursts, hoping to intimidate the distant P-38s. The result was a massive, documented waste of German ammunition, 0 hits, and a sharp drop in AA crew morale. The German High Command was forced to initiate a costly, slow program to develop new, higher-caliber AA guns capable of hitting targets at 6 miles, a direct, quantifiable response to Haynes's initial civilian lens hack. The Ordnance Corps, however, fought a bitter internal war against the very success they needed. They were deeply embarrassed by the reliance on civilian mail-order optics. Their response was the ultimate act of bureaucratic defense: design their own version. The Ordnance Corps fast-tracked the design of the official, military-designed long-range scope, the M7. It was built to military specification, rugged, heavy, and rated for high G-forces. The brass invested significant time and resources into developing this official solution, designed to prove the supremacy of military R&D. The M7 prototype arrived for testing. It was mounted side by side on AP-38 with Miller's M6 mod. The test was conclusive. The M7, built to survive a crash, was too heavy and its lenses, while durable, still suffered from the same chord distortion flaws. The M7 blurred at 4 miles. The civilian modified M6 mod remained crystal clear at 5 miles. The failure of the official, expensive R&D was an irrefutable vindication of Haynes's original, illegal diagnosis. The military had failed to beat the civilian component. The Army was forced to accept a humiliating reality. The best optic they had was the one they had rejected. The Ordnance Corps filed the final memo. They formalized the M6 mod into permanent production, ensuring that all new recon scopes received the modified design. But the memo was sanitized. The official design credit was assigned to the Advanced Optical Design Committee. Lieutenant Haynes was permanently transferred out of the combat theater and assigned to an obscure desk job in the Supply Corps, effectively silencing the innovator and removing him from the chain of command. He was punished for the violation, while the system claimed the reward. Sergeant Miller was given a medal for his exceptional service to optical maintenance, and a small, quiet promotion. The official record contained no mention of Leica, jewelry files, or postal shipments from housewives. The innovation was now official, but the inventor and the mechanic who risked everything were erased. The intelligence gathered by the M6 mod scopes in the fall of 1944 provided the essential tactical advantage needed for the final Allied push. The ability to identify targets and enemy troop formations from outside the danger zone saved countless lives and allowed for precise planning. The high-resolution photographs gave the Allied command the necessary clarity to execute the final, coordinated assaults. The quiet revolution of optics secured the final victory, not through superior firepower, but through superior sight. End of Act 3. 4. 5500. Strictly 5,500 characters including spaces and formatting.